Hi friends, it's me, Bee from Bee in the Studio. Welcome to week 2 of the Made of Starstuffs quilt along. This video, it's for my Made of Starstuffs quilt pattern. This video is going to be a little mini class on the second block in the pattern, which is a Pinwheel Star. So I'm going to go ahead and sew through that in depth today or on this video and show you how I put that block together. I also have a studio vlog that I've put out this week where I have the camera in my studio as I'm sewing and I'm working on my own quilt as well for this quilt along, so it's the progress on that. If you're interested, make sure and check on my channel for that. I also will have an in-depth blog post on my blog that is basically the written version of this video for going over the Pinwheel Star. So I have all my fabrics cut out behind me. I'm ready to go. Let's dive in and get our Pinwheel Star blocks made. Okay friends, so let's get started. I have all the pieces cut out for this block. These are for the Flying Geese and these are going to be for our half square triangles. So just like we did last week, you can mark the center line of the square if you want to for the half square triangles, but I'm going to show you the little trick I use at my sewing machine with the diagonal seam tape from Cluck Cluck Sew. So I have this sew line pencil that I like to mark, so you can just do a quick line if you want, but if you want to save yourself some time, you can do the diagonal seam tape trick I'm going to show you at my sewing machine. Okay, so we're going to sew this together. So I didn't mark this one. I'm going to use my seam tape here. This is diagonal seam tape from Cluck Cluck Sew. I'll put the link down in the description. And the thing I love about it is you line up the point of the square on the tape. I have mine running into my 1/4 inch line on here. And then once you do that, you can just run. So I need, because it's a half square triangle, so we need to sew a 1/4 inch on this side of the center line and a 1/4 inch on this side. So we're going to start here, and using the tape we can just run and keeping the point following the line here so you can see, and that will put this seam a perfect 1/4 inch from the center line, if you can see that. So I'm just going to toss this in here and do the other side as well. Line it up on that 1/4 seam there, or 1/4 inch seam, and then hold it here, hold it across, and we have our half square triangle ready to cut down. Our 2 half square triangles, one here and here, ready to cut down the center. So I will meet you back over at the cutting table to do that. Alright, I have my half square triangle here ready to cut in half. If you've already watched my other video, you have heard this already, but in case you're just watching this one, I like this Clearly Perfect slotted trimmer from New Leaf Stitches. I've tried a bunch of different half square triangle things to square them up, and this is my favorite one. So I just use the center of it even to cut the 2 half square triangles apart. And then I like to trim up and square up my half square triangle before pressing it open. So it's really easy with this ruler. There's a little sew line on here, and then this is supposed to be the seam allowance, the little gray part, if you can see that on there. So you just want to line it up on your seam and then trim off the sides, and that'll square it up. I made the half square triangles in this pattern oversized on purpose so that you have room to square them up and you can have them as square as possible. So the thing I really like is it has these little slots on it that you can trim the dog ears off on there easily, and you have a perfect half square triangle ready to press. So I'm going to go ahead and do this one as well. If you like this trimmer, if this is something you think you'd be interested in, I originally bought just this one and ended up going back and buying, this one does whole inches, and I ended up having to go back and buy one that does 1/2 inches as well. So it's different for the different sizes, but they do sell it as a 2-pack. And so if you think you're going to want it, I would recommend just doing the 2-pack to start, since it'll save you a little bit of money, and then you have them ready no matter the size of half square triangle you're going to do. So these are ready to go, and I realized I have my scrap still because I apparently moved my scrap basket from under the table. Whoops. But let's go get these pressed open at my my pressing station. I've got my house square triangles over here ready to press, and my favorite little trick with pressing is whatever way you need the seam to press towards. If you put that fabric up, you'll know that you're always pressing it towards the right direction. So in this case, it's that pink fabric, or the lighter pink fabric, since it's two fabrics, which, can you tell I like pink with the pink iron too? So the only thing about half square triangles when you're pressing them is, since you sewed across the bias, they're fairly stable, but you don't want to press too hard on this corner as you're pressing. You just kind of want to gently press and let the iron do the work so that you don't kind of misshape and warp the corner. If you want, you can always add some best press to it to keep the square nice and stable for when you're sewing it together within the whole quilt and in the block. So I've got my 2 half square triangles ready to go. I'm going to go finish up the other 3 or 6, I guess, that go with this pattern, and I will meet you back at the cutting table for Flying Geese. So we have all of our half square triangles finished here and ready to go, and now we're going to do Flying Geese. So in the Sawtooth Star block, I had you do Flying Geese 4 at a time, which is my preferred method to do Flying Geese. And I do have a method for doing flying. So this one, we're doing single Flying Goose. It's Flying Geese at a time, because the 2 points of the Flying Geese are different colors. And so I do have a method for doing that 4 at a time too, but it involves cutting across the bias, and it can be kind of wiggly when you're sewing it together. And I didn't have great results when I was testing it, so I decided to go ahead and do it 1 at a time, even though there's more waste on it. But I'll show you some things you can do with that. So I am going to make another mini tutorial for next week for the quilt along, where I show you how to do the bigger square and then cut these in half and do Flying Geese 4 at a time with the 2 different colored points. But for today, let's do this one. So we need to start with one of our fabrics, and this is very much like the half square triangles in my mind. You just line this right up on the corner, and what we're going to do is we're going to sew corner to corner on here, so that then when we flip this up, we're going to have our Flying Geese block. So 2 things. In the pattern it says to draw a line, so you can take your ruler and draw across if you want. I'm going to go ahead and use the diagonal seam tape on my machine that we've seen earlier. And then the other thing is, oh, I've forgotten. I wonder what the other thing was. That's a good question. Well, I'll tell you. So I'm going to give you a couple tricks to not wasting this whole triangle that you're going to cut off. So you can pin it, which is what I did. So as I cut them off in my other video, I pinned them together, and I can sew a nice little half square triangle, make a half square triangle from that. The nice thing is these blocks are big enough that that actually makes a 4-inch unfinished, so 3.5 inch finished half square triangle. So it's actually a pretty good half square triangle. But I remembered what the other thing is. The other thing I just heard in my Modern Quilt Guild here is that if you sew, they said a 1/4 inch, but I think if you sew, so you sew corner to corner and then you sew a 1/2 inch up, when you cut it, since you're already at the machine, it's 1 extra little seam, and then when you cut it, you have a half square triangle ready to go. So I think I'm actually going to do that with this one. So the other thing I was going to say is, the only place that my pattern testers had any kind of issue in this pattern was one of them, when she sewed corner to corner on the center line, her blocks came out actually almost a whole 1/4 inch undersized. So what I had her do is, instead of sewing on this line, she sewed slightly back towards the corner, slightly that way from the center line, and that made her Flying Geese perfect every time. So if you're having any kind of issue with your Flying Geese coming out undersized, I recommend trying that. So let's take this to the sewing machine and get it sewn together. All right, I have my Flying Geese block here ready to sew. I did actually end up drawing an extra line on here so that I can show you what it's like to have a ready to go half square triangle from your waist here. One of the best parts of the quilt along is I can show you some little extra parts like that. But honestly, I'm going to watch, even though this is marked, I really marked the center line so I know where the 1/2 inch line is. So I'm going to watch the point here and the point there more than the line as I sew. So the nice thing, because if you're watching the line, you're kind of watching up by the needle, but if you're watching the point, you're watching out back, so it's a little bit easier to sew. Okay, so I got that sewn there. That is ready to make my Flying Geese corner there. And then I'm going to go ahead and sew this line, which I can kind of watch on the center line too. And that should make me my half square triangle that's already built into the waist. So let's head back to the cutting table and get this guy cut apart and get the other side ready to go. Alright, I have the first side of my Flying Geese block here ready to cut apart, so I'm just going to put this on the 1/4 inch line on my ruler, and I'm going to cut that apart. And I already have this other seam sewn, which should make a little half square triangle ready to go. So let's go ahead and square that up, and then we can press these both on the cutting, or I keep saying that, the pressing station. Yeah, so that makes a 4-inch unfinished half square triangle. And this ruler does not actually have slots on the 4-inch for the dog ears, so I'm going to go ahead and cut that off. And then we'll get these pressed over at the pressing station and take one of these over to the sewing machine and sew that on as well. So let's go get that done. Okay, so I have my Flying Geese here and my little half square triangle I made from it, so I'm just going to press those both open and just press this up like this. It feels very similar to the half square triangle. You just have more on this side than you did on the half square triangle. And so again, as you press that corner up, make sure, though it's sewn across the bias, you don't warp it. As you press it, you could definitely add some spray starch or best press like I use to make it a little bit more stable while you sew it together. So there we go. We have our half square triangle, wrong way, half square triangle. That's just for fun and for spare. And then to show you what I did in this pattern, or what you can do with this pattern, and our Flying Geese half finished. So let's go finish this guy up at the sewing machine. I'm back at my sewing machine and ready to finish up this Flying Geese block. Again, I just want to clarify, the half square triangle I made from the extra you cut off on this one isn't actually a part of this pattern. It's just something that you can do with that waste fabric, so you're not wasting so much fabric. It gives you a little extra block that you can use for different projects. So I'm going to go ahead and do it on this one too, so you can see what it looks like and how to do it. But again, I just want to make sure you understand it's not actually part of this particular pattern. So let's go ahead and sew here. I have it marked again, but I'm really running the point on the line of the diagonal seam tube. So let's get that sewn. And then we can actually just flip this guy around and go ahead and sew that 1/2 inch away, so we have a little bonus half square triangle instead of so much waste fabric there. And again, like I said, I'm going to put up a tutorial next week as well. That is how to do 4 at a time Flying Geese with the 2 different colored points. So that's another way to waste less fabric. So make sure and look for that next week if you don't like wasting the extra fabric here like it does and as the pattern's written. All right, let's take this over to the cutting table and get it pressed open. And then I think we will be ready to start assembling this block. Okay, so I have all my pieces ready to put my block together and my bonus little half square triangles that I'm going to set aside. So my favorite part, or my favorite thing at this step, well, this is actually one of my favorite parts, is assembling the block. So my favorite thing to do at this point is to go ahead and lay out the block so I can start working from here. And I know I get all my seams together right. We're going to assemble the pinwheel in the center pinwheel. That's going to be our next step. So I'm going to put this in here like so to make sure that I have everything going the right directions, because I'm really good at putting this together the wrong way. So I like to lay it out before I get going so that I can make sure everything's going the right way. I'm just checking it against the diagram I have over here and everything looks right. And then, so if I put these corners in, when I'm ready to sew, what I like to do, put these in, moving extra slow today, is just take these guys and flip them like this. And then I know I'll make sure and hold on to this seam as I walk over to my machine. And then I know that I'm going to sew them the right way as long as I keep on this edge. So let's go get these sewn together at the sewing machine. So I did actually end up just going ahead and sticking a pin in the side there. Not obviously they're not lined up at all with it. I just did that so that I made sure I'm sewing the right side together. This is especially helpful if you watch my studio vlog this week. I sew 6 blocks together at the same time, and so this is especially helpful if you're sewing multiple block centers together at the same time. But I just went ahead and did it because I have had to pull out way too many seams because I'm not paying attention. So this is really simple sewing. Just gonna sew these 2 together, and then I will press the seams the correct direction towards, I'll have to check one of the triangles, and then I'll meet you back here and sew together. So I think I actually might speed through the next couple steps just because you know what I'm doing. So let's go ahead and do that. So I did actually want to say, since you're matching up the centers here, I do end up pinning this one together, at least in the center. I'm going to go ahead and put a pin in the center and on the 2 sides, but you do what works for you. I do have all these seams designed to nest, so if you're confident, you don't really have to pin this because it should just kind of go on its own, but I like to pin it just to be extra safe. I've just ripped so many stitches in my life. I think I'm overly sensitive to it. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and get this guy sewn together and then press it, and we will be ready to sew the whole block together. We're almost done now. So let's get this guy done. And I think I will go ahead and press this off camera, and I will meet you guys back at my cutting table so that we can get the rest of the blocks together and ready to sew. As you can see, we have the whole block laid out and ready to go. So I'm going to show you how I do it when I'm sewing it together. I put the 2 sides on each piece like this, and then I'll start go on this one. And then I go ahead and just carry this whole thing over to my sewing machine. So I will tell you now, because I think I'm going to speed through the sewing part on my machine because I'm assuming you guys know how to sew, but I will so I'm going to pin them first too. This is one of those other spots I pin, and on these Flying Geese, the way I was told, the way I learned to sew them is to sew 1 stitch back from that little point on the Flying Geese, and that gives you a perfect point on your Flying Geese every time. So yes, let's get this sewn together, and then I think I may just kind of speed through the rest because I'm assuming that you guys know how to assemble these. Just match up your points. I'll do pinning. You can see how I sew it, and I'll see you in a minute. My 3 strips from my block all ready to go here, and I just wanted to pop back in and say one of my favorite things about this block in the pattern is that when you get to this step, all of the seams get pressed towards the Flying Geese, not just on the sides but on the center too, and I love that when something's nice and easy to remember because it's all the same. So I just wanted, since I find myself checking and rechecking patterns on what direction to press these. I just thought I would say that this one is very handy at this point because everything presses towards the Flying Geese. So I'm gonna get these, whoopsies, as I say that and then do it backwards. All right, so I'm just gonna get these guys finished up and we will head back to the sewing machine and I'm gonna pin this together because there's several places it matches up. Oh, that didn't press very well. So I'm gonna go ahead and pin this and get it sewn, and then we are just shy. We just have to press this block and we will be done. So these didn't press very well in the back this time, so I'm just cleaning them up. And there we go, looking good. It's almost finished. I'll see you at the sewing machine. Alright, quilty friends, that is it for my little mini class on the Pinwheel Star block for the week. For the second week here of my Made of Starstuffs quilt along, I will have one more video tutorial, little mini class for 4 at a time flying geese with the 2 different colored points like I mentioned in this video. I'll have that one up next week. And then make sure, if you're interested, check on my channel. I also did a week 2 studio vlog where I recorded myself while I was making, I got 6 of the Pinwheel Star blocks that I just showed you how to do. I got 6 of those done for my own quilt, so make sure and check that out as well. That's it. I hope you got some sewing time and quilting time in this week, and if you didn't, I hope that this video can help inspire you to make some time to sew. And that's all, and I will see you again next week. Bye.